fall asleep as a dwarf in the Bavarian Mountains. Chapter 1. Dawn in the Mountain Stronghold. In the still, quiet hours of morning, deep inside a mountain in the Bavarian Alps, a lone dwarf begins to stir. The great stone chamber that serves as his bedroom is cool and dim, lit only by the faint glow of embers smouldering in a small hearth. Carved from the mountain itself, the walls of the room are decorated with intricate runes and reliefs of ancient dwarven heroes. Thick bearskin furs cover the stout figure lying on a sturdy bed of oak and stone. As dawn approaches in the world outside, a gentle golden light filters through a narrow shaft in the rock, casting a soft beam across the chamber. The dwarf beneath the furs is named Grimmel. With a low grumble, Grimmel blinks awake, his eyes adjusting to the subtle glow filling his room. He is a gruff and weathered dwarf, with a long, iron-grey beard braided neatly down his chest. Though he is known for his stubborn pride and greedy love of treasure, this morning his craggy face softens with the simple comfort of a new day. He stretches his short but powerful limbs beneath the warm furs, relishing the lingering warmth that surrounds him. Grimmel swings his stout legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet meeting the cool, smooth stone floor. He lets out a contented, rumbling sigh. The air in his chamber carries the earthy scent of stone and a hint of wood smoke from last night's fire. Reaching to a bedside table carved directly from the rock wall, he finds a bronze lantern. With practiced ease, he strikes a flint to light it. A tiny flame springs to life, illuminating the room with a gentle amber glow that dances on the stone carvings. Slowly the dwarf rises and dons his morning attire. He pulls on a thick woolen tunic dyed in deep green and fastens a wide leather belt around his ample waist. His belt buckle is a heavy piece of polished brass shaped like a hammer, a symbol of his craft and status. Next, he steps into sturdy trousers and tugs on his well-worn leather boots. They are reinforced with steel toe caps he forged himself, and they clack softly on the stone as he moves. Finally, Grimmel drapes a warm fur-lined vest over his shoulders, warding off the chill of the mountain air. Standing in the center of his chamber, lantern in hand, Grimmel takes a moment to appreciate the calm of early morning. The engraved figures of dwarven ancestors seem to watch him from the walls. He bows his head briefly in respect to them, a daily ritual. Under his breath he mutters a gravelly Guten Morgen, paying homage to the spirits of the stone and to his forebears, asking silently for another prosperous day under the mountain. The dim beam of dawn light slowly shifts across the floor as the sun climbs outside. In this hidden stronghold, day and night are marked not by the sky above, but by routines and subtle touches, like this sun shaft. Grimmel steps into the path of the light and closes his eyes for a moment, feeling its faint warmth on his face. Though he loves the darkness of his halls, the gentle kiss of morning sunlight is a welcome friend each day. With a final satisfied grunt, the dwarf collects a small copper basin from a shelf. He pours in water drawn from an underground spring. The water is icy, fresh, and pure. Grimmel splashes the cold water onto his face and bushy beard, fully waking himself with a shiver and a brisk shake of his head. Droplets glisten in his beard as he pats it dry with a linen cloth. Feeling refreshed and awake, he sets the basin aside. Grimmel hangs the lantern on a peg by the door to his chamber. The hallways beyond are already faintly lit by steady amber lamps maintained through the night. Before leaving, He takes a moment to smooth his beard and tuck in the loose strands. Dwarves take pride in their beards, and Grimmel is no exception. Satisfied that his braided beard is in order and his clothes neatly arranged, he pushes open the heavy oak door of his chamber. The door opens onto a broad corridor hewn from solid rock. The corridor stretches off in both directions, gently curved and reinforced with arches carved to resemble interlocking oak branches, a nod to the forests that blanket the mountainside above. The floor is polished smooth by generations of dwarf footsteps. As Grimmel steps out, the sole of his boot touches a particular stone in the threshold that he himself installed long ago. A faint smile of pride touches his lips. Stubborn though he may be, he takes quiet pleasure in the craftsmanship surrounding him, much of which he contributed to. The mountain stronghold is quiet at this hour. Only a distant drip of water from some far cavern and the soft echo of his own footfalls accompany Grimmel as he begins his walk. His stomach gives a slight rumble, reminding him of the hearty breakfast that awaits. With lantern light no longer needed, he leaves it behind and strides down the hall towards the heart of the stronghold, the great dining hall where morning meals are served. As he walks, Grimmel's calloused hand gently brushes the stone wall, feeling the familiar grooves of carved runes under his fingers. Each rune tells part of his clan's long history in this mountain stories of hard work, plentiful ore, and the wealth of gems won from the earth. These reassuring tales etched in stone keep him company as he heads off to break his fast. Another day begun in the deep comfort of the dwarven halls. Chapter 2. Breakfast in the Great Hall. Grimmel soon arrives at the Great Hall, the dining chamber of the stronghold, where the dwarves gather to share their meals. The hall is a magnificent space carved deep within the mountain. Rows of thick stone pillars support the vaulted ceiling, each pillar carved with images of curling oak leaves and mountain flowers entwined around sturdy axes. Wall sconces hold bronze oil lamps that cast a steady, honeyed light across long wooden tables. At the far end of the hall, a grand fireplace built into the rock provides both warmth and a welcoming glow. The scent of wood smoke and hearty cooking fills the air, a comforting fragrance that makes Grimmel's stomach rumble a bit more insistently. Though it is still early, a few other dwarves are already settled at the tables, quietly enjoying their first meal of the day. The atmosphere is calm and homely. Low voices trade gentle morning greetings, their words punctuated by the clink of ceramic mugs and wooden spoons against bowls. A younger dwarf carrying a large tray of fresh bread sees Grimmel entering and gives a respectful nod. "Morgan, Master Grimmel," the lad says softly. Grimmel grunts in reply, a sound that to the unknowing ear might seem curt, but the faint twinkle in his eye reveals the dwarf's muted friendliness. In truth, the gruff dwarf appreciates the greeting. He's simply a dwarf of few words in the morning. Grimmel finds his usual seat at one of the long tables, a sturdy bench cushioned with worn leather pads for comfort. Before him, a generous breakfast has already been laid out by the hall's diligent cooks. There is a thick slice of dark rye bread, still warm from the oven and smelling of malt and grain. Beside it sits a pat of golden butter and a wedge of sharp mountain cheese wrapped in a fig leaf to keep it moist. Steam curls from a wooden bowl filled with hearty barley porridge studded with raisins and nuts. A drizzle of honey glistens on its surface, catching the lamplight. And to wash it all down, an earthenware mug brimming with foamy ale waits at his elbow, brewed lightly for the morning, with notes of roasted barley and herbs that remind him of the alpine meadows outside. The dwarf rubs his hands together in anticipation and tucks in. He butters the warm bread with slow, deliberate strokes, watching the butter melt into the crust. He takes a bite, and a quiet sigh of satisfaction escapes through his beard. The bread is nutty and hearty, the butter rich and creamy. Next he samples the porridge, spooning it carefully. The sweet raisins and crunchy walnuts in the porridge provide a pleasant contrast, and the honey adds just the right touch of sweetness. It is a simple meal, but fortifying and comforting. Each bite warms him from within, chasing away the last traces of the morning chill. As he eats, Grimmel listens to the soft sounds around him. A pair of elder dwarves sit a few seats down, murmuring to each other about the day's tasks, plans to shore up a tunnel here, or smelt a batch of iron ore there. Their voices are low and steady, blending with the crackle of the fireplace. Across the hall, the young dwarf with the bread tray is now pouring hot spiced cider for an older cook, the liquid filling cups with a fragrant splash. From the kitchen alcove at the side of the hall drifts the comforting aroma of baking and the faint clang of pots, indicating more preparations underway for the day's meals. Grimmel is not one for idle chatter at dawn, but he gives a contented nod to the elder dwarves down the table and raises his mug of mild ale in a silent toast to the new day. One of them, a white-bearded fellow named Ordwin, returns the gesture with a warm smile and lifts his own cup of cider. "To another good day under the mountain," Ordwin says quietly. Grimmel responds with a simple H.M. and a firm nod, which in dwarven manner speaks as eloquently as any toast. He takes a deep draught of his ale, savouring the herbal hints and the way the cool brew refreshes him after the warm porridge. As breakfast continues, the great hall gradually sees a few more dwarves trickling in. Each arrival is greeted in hushed but cheerful tones. The hall never becomes loud or boisterous. Morning is a peaceful time here, a gentle start before the busy hammering and digging of the day begin. Even the newcomers instinctively tread softly on the stone floor, mindful of the tranquil atmosphere. Grimmel chews his food slowly, enjoying the rare moment of quiet companionship. A soft golden light from the rising sun outside filters in through a high ventilation shaft in the ceiling, mingling with the lamplight to give the hall a dawn-like glow. Dust motes dance lazily in that beam of sunlight above, but down at the tables the light is subdued and pleasant. Finishing his bread and cheese, Grimmel dabs his beard clean with a cloth, making sure no stray crumbs or drops of ale remain. He leans back slightly on the bench, feeling the solidity of the stone wall behind him. His stomach is full and content, and there is a comfortable heaviness in his limbs now, the good kind that comes from a satisfying meal. Around him, a few other dwarves conclude their breakfasts as well, stretching or standing to tidy up. One dwarf lets out a quiet belch, quickly muffled by a fist to his mouth, and a couple of others chuckle under their breaths. Even Grimmel's lips twitch in amusement. It's a small moment of humour that passes quickly, but eases everyone further into a relaxed state of mind. With breakfast done, Grimmel carefully gathers his dishes onto the tray, showing the conscientious habits typical of dwarven folk. A young dwarf from the kitchen comes by to collect the empty plates and bowls. "Thank you, lad," Grimmel says in his gravelly voice, which comes out sounding like a low rumble of distant thunder, gentle despite its depth. The young dwarf smiles and nods, balancing the tray with practiced skill as he moves on. Pushing himself up from the bench, Grimmel feels ready to start the day's labours. The satisfaction of the meal and the warmth of the hoar have loosened his muscles and lifted his spirits. He straightens his vest and gives a final appreciative glance at the great hall, the heart of his home, taking in the sight of its sturdy tables and glowing hearth. He knows that by evening these tables will again be filled with his kin, sharing stories and supper by firelight. The thought is comforting, a promise of companionship to come after the day's work. For now, though, duty call. Grimmel pats his full stomach once, an unconscious gesture of contentment, and sets off toward the forge hall to begin his morning's work. As he leaves the great hall, the sounds of quiet laughter and the clatter of dishes fade behind him, and a steady hush of the corridors welcomes him once more. Onward he goes, through an archway of carved stone, already anticipating the familiar heat and glow of the forge that awaits down the passage. Chapter 3. The Rhythms of the Forge. The path to the forges leads Grimmel through a series of gently descending corridors. As he approaches the smithy, the air grows warmer and carries a metallic tang. Soon, a soft orange glow flickers on the stone walls, and the distant, measured ringing of hammer on anvil reaches his ears, a steady heartbeat in the depths of the mountain. To a dwarf like Grimmel, that sound is as comforting as rain on a roof. It speaks of work being done, of metal being shaped and purposes fulfilled. He steps into the forge hall, a broad cavern outfitted as the Stronghold's smithy. Several forges line the walls, each one a wide-mouthed stone furnace with chimneys carved into natural cracks leading up to the mountain slopes. Charcoal embers smoulder in the hearths, and one forge fire is already stoked high, its flames licking up and casting dancing shadows. The glow illuminates racks of tools, hammers of various sizes, tongs hanging in neat rows, and molds and chisels laid out on heavy tables. Anvils stand solid and dark, their faces smooth from years of use. The floor is covered in fine black coal dust and scattered hammer scale, but it's swept to the sides, keeping the working area clear and safe. A young apprentice, Haldwin, is tending the active forge, working the bellows with a slow, methodical rhythm. With each pump, a dragon breath of heat flares from the coals, and the metal resting in the heart of the fire glows bright yellow. Haldwin looks up as Grimmel enters and gives a quick, respectful bow of his head. "Good day, Master Grimmel," he says in a low tone appropriate for the peaceful morning. Grimmel offers a gruff, "Good day" in response, already focusing his keen eyes on the piece of metal heating in the forge. Today, Grimmel has decided to forge a new pickaxe head for the mining crews. A vein of iron-rich ore was discovered deeper in the mountain last week, and new tools will ensure the work continues smoothly. It's a practical task, but one that Grimmel approaches with the same craftsmanship and care he would devote to a king's sword. He pulls on a thick leather apron and heavy gloves lined with wool. Though the fire's heat never bothered him much, a lifetime at the forge has made his skin resilient. Safety and precision are habits he values. With a gesture to Haldwin, Grimmel takes over the forge. The apprentice steps aside to let the master work, but remains nearby to assist as needed. Using long tongs, Grimmel withdraws the iron billet from the heart of the coals. It is glowing almost white-hot, lighting the craggy features of his face in a warm radiance. He carries it swiftly to the anvil and sets it in place. The metal's heat pulses in the air, and a few tiny sparks drift off, dancing for an instant before fading. Grimmel grips a large forging hammer, its weight familiar and reassuring in his hand. He positions the hot iron on the anvil and begins to hammer. The first strike rings out clear and true, a bright note echoing off the stone walls. Haldwin has dampened the other sounds in the chamber. No one else is hammering at this exact moment, as if giving the master the floor. Each subsequent strike falls in a steady cadence. Clang, clang, clang. The rhythm is slow and unhurried, yet each impact is firm. Between strikes, Grimmel rotates the iron with his tongs, methodically shaping the glowing metal. The ring of the hammer is not jarring or harsh in this context. Instead, it creates a soothing pattern, like a deep bell tolling in harmony with the mountain itself. The apprentice resumes the bellows in time with Grimmel's work, the quiet whoosh of air feeding the flames in a complementary rhythm. Together the sounds hammer, anvil, bellows, and the crackle of fire form a kind of ancient music. It is said by villagers in the valley that on calm mornings they sometimes hear faint ringing from the mountains, attributing it to distant church bells or the songs of stone. Little do they know it's the dwarven forgers singing as the day's labour begins beneath the peaks. Sparks fly gently with each hammer blow, and Grimmel's concentration is absolute. His brow furrows in determination, yet there is a contentment in his eyes. This is work he loves, transforming raw metal into something strong and useful. The shape of the pickaxe head emerges gradually under his skilled hands. He pauses occasionally to examine his progress, grunting softly in approval at the evenness of the metal's edge or the symmetry of its form. Haldwin periodically fetches a ladle of water to sprinkle on the anvil, creating a brief hiss and puff of steam as stray bits of slag are cooled and cleaned away. The scent of hot metal and a hint of coal smoke perfume the air, strangely pleasant in their familiarity. Once the initial shaping is done, Grimmel returns the workpiece to the forge to reheat. While waiting for the iron to regain its glow, he allows himself a brief moment to stretch his shoulders and roll his wrists, easing any stiffness. The apprentice offers him a dipper of cool water from a barrel in the corner, and Grimmel takes a sip, nodding thanks. The water is crisp and refreshing, cutting through the warm dryness of the forge air. Before long, the iron is glowing cherry red again. Grimmel returns to the anvil for the next round of hammering. With precise, controlled blows, he refines the pickaxe head, drawing out the metal to form a pointed tip on one end for breaking rock, and a flat blade on the other for prying. He works steadily, not rushing, letting the iron tell him when it needs another reheat or when it is malleable enough to shape. There is a patient dance between dwarf and metal, a give and take that has been learned over centuries by his kind. The slow, repetitive motion and the warmth surrounding them create a lull that could almost make an onlooker drowsy, but Grimmel remains focused and present in the flow of his craft. At last, the rough forging is complete. He cools the piece, then carries it with tongs to a waiting barrel of oil to quench it fully. As the hot metal plunges in, a cloud of white steam billows up with a gentle hiss. The smell of oil and metal mingles in a not unpleasant way. Grimmel watches intently, noting the subtle vibrations as the metal temper hardens. When the hissing subsides, he lifts the quenched pickaxe head, now blackened and still warm, into the light. He inspects it for any cracks or warps, running a gloved thumb along the edge. Satisfied with the result, a small smile of pride appears under his beard. Haldwin grins, clearly impressed with the master's workmanship. "A fine piece, sir," the young dwarf says quietly, eyes shining with admiration. Grimmel gives a modest shrug, though his chest swells slightly at the praise. "It'll hold," he replies, trying not to betray too much pleasure in his own work. In truth, the compliment warms him nearly as much as the forge did, though a dwarf of his demeanour would seldom admit it aloud. Setting the newly forged pickaxe head aside to cool completely, Grimmel takes a moment to tidy the workspace. He places his hammer back on its rack and returns the tongs to their hook. The apprentice busies himself sweeping the stray scale off the floor and arranging tools back in order. The forge's fire is damped down a bit now that the major work is done. It crackles in a contented way, like a beast at rest after exertion. Grimel removes his heavy gloves and flexes his fingers. His skin is flushed from the heat, and a light sheen of sweat has settled on his brow, but he feels invigorated. Looking around the forge hall, Grimmel sees a couple of other smiths now working at the far end, quietly engaged in their own tasks, one pounding out thin metal sheets for lanterns, another carefully sharpening a batch of chisels. The earlier solitude has given way to a gentle industry. The forge hall is alive with a soft symphony of metal on metal, underscored by the whisper of bellows and the crackling fires. It is a productive, satisfying morning. Grimmel hangs his apron on a peg and pats Haldwin on the shoulder in thanks for his assistance. The apprentice beams at this small acknowledgment. Together they carry the cooled pickaxe head to a rack where finished tools await delivery to the mines. Its dark iron shape gleams faintly with oil in the firelight, promising strength and reliability. Grimmel runs a finger over the dwarf-forged steel one more time, taking quiet pride in a job well done. Now the afternoon beckons, and with the forging complete, Grimmel's thoughts turn to another personal pleasure. Before attending to any further duties, he decides to pay a visit to his own hidden vault of treasures, a reward to himself for the morning's hard work. With a content nod to Haldwin and a final glance around the glowing forge hall, Grimmel departs, leaving the rhythmic sounds of the smithy behind as he heads toward the quieter, secret chambers of the Stronghold. Chapter 4. The Secret Vault of Treasures. Leaving the warmth of the forge behind, Grimmel makes his way through a quieter section of the Stronghold. The passageways here slope gently downward into older, deeper parts of the mountain. The lamps are spaced farther apart, and the air grows cooler and still. With each step, the bustle of the inhabited halls fades, replaced by a profound silence. Only the dwarves' own footfalls and the faint drip of moisture from distant mineral springs accompany him now. Grimmel reaches a tall pair of doors set into an alcove of carved granite. These doors are unlike the others in the Stronghold. They are made of iron-bound oak and reinforced with crossbars of black steel. Intricate patterns of interlocking runes are inlaid in silver across their surface, spelling out old dwarven charms of protection and secrecy. This is the entrance to Grimmel's personal vault, where he keeps his most prized treasures safe. The doors have no obvious handle. Instead, at their center sits a heavy lock, wrought in the shape of a mountain with a keyhole at its heart. From a pocket inside his vest, Grimmel produces a large iron key. It is a sturdy key, nearly the length of his hand, and its bow is shaped like a gear with tiny runic letters etched along its edge. He fits the key into the lock and gives it a firm turn. The mechanism inside clunks and clicks, echoing in the silence. With a low rumble, the great doors ease open, revealing darkness beyond. The dwarf takes a lantern from a wall hook and steps through the doorway. As he enters, he pauses momentarily to press a small lever disguised as part of a carving on the interior wall. The clever dwarven engineering engages, and the heavy doors gently swing shut behind him, sealing him in the vault's privacy. Only the golden light of his lantern now illuminates the space. Grimmel's vault is not an immense cavern, but a modest chamber carved perfectly to his needs. The ceiling is arched and supported by 2 carved stone pillars shaped like stout dwarves holding up the rock. Around the room, niches and alcoves have been built into the walls, and within them lie his treasures. At first, the lantern's glow reveals glints and sparkles reflecting back from these alcoves, pinpricks of red, blue, green, and, above all, the rich yellow shine of gold. A broad smile, rare and full of childlike delight, spreads across Grimmel's face. In this solitude he allows his gruff demeanour to soften completely. Here he is simply a dwarf enjoying the fruits of years, even decades, of labour and love. He walks slowly along the nearest wall, holding up the lantern to admire the items displayed. On a low shelf rests a neat stack of gold ingots cast from the very ore mined in these mountains. Each ingot bears the mark of his clan and the year it was smelted. Grimmel runs his thick fingers over one, feeling the cold, heavy smoothness of the precious metal. Gold to a dwarf is more than wealth. It is the mountain's gift, a beautiful substance to shape and hoard against times of need. He mutters softly to himself, still all here, eh? As if the gold might answer with a reassuring glint. In another alcove lies a small heap of jewels on a velvet cloth, deep red garnets, luminous emeralds, a few sapphires the colour of a summer sky, and many glimmering amethysts, the most plentiful gem in these pair. Bavarian peaks. Grimmel gently picks up one amethyst the size of a walnut. Holding it up to the lantern light, he marvels at the way the purple facets catch and scatter the glow, painting flickering lilac patterns on the stone wall. This particular gem he remembers finding years ago in a geode he cracked open deep in the mines, a rare treasure granted by the earth itself. He turns it over in his work-roughened palm, and then polishes it with a corner of his sleeve until it gleams. Further along, resting on a stand, is a heavy necklace of interlinked silver and gold, set with a single amber stone. The amber is ancient, with a tiny pine needle and a trapped insect visible inside its golden interior. This necklace isn't of dwarf make. Grimmel obtained it in a trade with travelling merchants from a human town in the valley below many years ago. In exchange, he'd given them a finely crafted set of tools. The necklace caught his fancy because the amber reminded him of warm honey and sunlight. He likes to imagine the drop of resin falling in a forest eons past, preserving a little moment of the outside world. Occasionally he lends this piece to his sister to wear during high festivals in the Stronghold, but it always finds its way back here, to his collection. Leaning the lantern forward, Grimmel illuminates the far end of the vault. There, on a carved stone plinth, sits the centerpiece of his hoard, a great chalice known simply as the Mountain's Crown. It is an ornate goblet he himself crafted in his youth, fashioned from the purest gold and encrusted with small gemstones all around its bowl. The design of the chalice depicts a ring of mountain peaks holding up the sky, rendered in precious metal. The gems sparkle like stars above the peaks. This goblet won him renown among his kin for its beauty, and though he could have presented it to a king or chief, Grimmel's greedy streak had held him back. He was too fond of it to part with it. Instead, it remains here, a testament to his skill and a treasure he allows himself to keep. He steps closer and inspects it, noting that a bit of dust has gathered in the fine filigree. From a pocket he retrieves a soft cloth and carefully dusts the chalice, making the gold shine as brilliantly as if new. With each object he tends to or admires, Grimmel feels a deep sense of comfort. The vault is quiet. Only his breathing and the occasional soft clink of metal disturb the silence. He hums a low, contented tune, a fragment of an old dwarf lullaby, while gently rearranging a few coins that had toppled from a small pile. The tune vibrates in his chest and echoes faintly off the vault's stone walls, wrapping the treasures in a gentle sound. At last, satisfied that all is in order, Grimmel steps back to take in the whole room. The lantern light creates an almost magical tableau. Gold and gems twinkle from every corner, reflections dancing like tiny stars in an underground sky. To him, this place is as wondrous and soothing as a quiet forest grove might be to an elf, or a sunny field to a human farmer. Each coin and jewel has its place and story, and all of it is his, kept safe under lock and key. Feeling the weight of contentment settle in his chest, Grimmel lets out a deep, pleased sigh. His greedy heart is at peace in moments like this, when he can simply exist among his treasures with no fear of disturbance or loss. In this stronghold hidden from the world, guarded by stone and secrecy, his hoard is secure. And because it is secure, he can relax completely. With a nod of farewell to the glittering alcoves, as if saying goodbye to old friend, Grimmel turns back toward the door. He pats the Mountain's Crown chalice affectionately once before departing, the way one might pat a favored pet or a loyal steed. Then he flips the lever to release the door lock. The heavy doors swing open smoothly, revealing the corridor's dim light. Grimmel steps out and closes the vault behind him. He locks it with the great iron key, giving the door a firm tug to ensure it is sealed. Satisfied, he tucks the key back into his vest pocket. The treasures are once more hidden away in darkness and silence, resting until he next comes to visit them. Now it is time to return to the more inhabited parts of the stronghold. Grimmel feels a certain spring in his step as he walks back up the sloping passage, his mood lifted by the private moments spent with his hoard. The quiet stone halls welcome him again, and he decides that a leisurely stroll through some of the older tunnels would be a fine way to spend the afternoon, letting his hearty meal and morning's work settle. With lantern in hand to light the way, the dwarf heads toward a side passage, one that leads to the deep carved tunnels where few venture except for peace and reflection. Chapter 5. Wandering the Deep Tunnels. Grimmel now follows a gently curving passage that leads away from the populated quarters and into the older, seldom-travelled tunnels of the stronghold. This corridor is narrower than the main halls, with a lower ceiling that forces taller folk to bow their heads, though for the dwarves' stout stature it is perfectly comfortable. Along the walls, ancient murals and carvings tell stories of generations long past. He passes a faded relief depicting miners of old uncovering a rich vein of ore, their bearded faces etched with triumph. Further on, another carving shows a line of dwarf craftsmen presenting a magnificent crown to their chieftain under the arch of a mountain. Grimmel runs his hand lightly over these time-worn carvings, feeling the grooves and contours under his fingertips. A sense of continuity and peace flows from the stone. It's as if the very history of his people is alive in these walls, walking beside him in silence. Deeper and deeper he goes, lantern held aloft to guide his way. The air here is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and minerals. Every so often, a drop of water falls from the ceiling, landing on the stone floor with a soft plink that echoes down the tunnel. The sound is slow. Measured footsteps. Despite the depth and darkness of these passages, the dwarf feels completely at home and at ease. The mountain is his realm, and these tunnels are like the calm, dim corridors of a great ancestral home. After a time, the tunnel opens out into a cavernous space, a natural chamber formed eons ago by underground waters. Grimmel's lantern light reaches up to a dome-like ceiling sparkling with mineral deposits. Threads of quartz and veins of ore catch the glow, twinkling faintly overhead like a map of constellations set in stone. He stands for a moment at the threshold, taking in the hushed beauty of this hidden grotto. This has always been one of his favorite places to seek solitude and quiet reflection. Venturing in, he moves toward the center, where a still, clear pool of water occupies a basin in the rock floor. The pool is not large, perhaps a few dwarf lengths across, but its water is exceptionally pure. Peering into it, Grimmel can see the smooth pebbles lining the bottom, and even his own reflection, dimly illuminated by the lantern's flicker. The reflection shows his face softened by tranquility, the stern lines of age gentler in the calm light. He kneels by the pool and dips his fingers into the water. It is cold, drawn from the mountain's heart. The chill against his skin is bracing, but not unpleasant. He cups his hand and brings a bit of the water to his lips, sipping the mineral-rich drink. It tastes fresh, with a whisper of iron from the rocks, a taste deeply familiar and comforting to a dwarf palate. Grimmel lingers by the pool, listening to the soft drip of condensation from stalactites above rippling the surface now and then. In the quiet, he allows his mind to wander. He thinks of the days when he was a young dwarf, exploring these caverns for the first time, with his father guiding him. He recalls how enormous and mysterious the mountain seemed back then, an endless world of stone and shadow to discover. Now, many years later, these halls are like old friends. The mystery has been replaced by intimacy. He knows their contours and secrets intimately, and that too is comforting in its own way. The cavern also holds subtle signs of dwarven care. Long ago, the dwarves of his clan decided to cultivate some of the resources nature provided here. In one corner of the grotto, logs of decaying oak have been arranged in a small, grove-like cluster, Upon them grow plump, pale mushrooms, thriving in the damp darkness. These are mooncap mushrooms, a favoured ingredient in dwarven cooking for their rich, earthy flavour. Grimmel notices that several are ripe for harvest, their round caps fully open. He wasn't specifically sent to gather mushrooms, but he knows the cooks will be glad for them. He sets his lantern on a flat rock and fetches a small wicker basket that hangs on a peg driven into a crevice nearby, left here for just such purposes. Working slowly and carefully, Grimmel begins to pick the mushrooms. He twists each fungus gently at its base, the way his mother taught him when he was but a dwarfling helping in the pantry. Each one comes free with a soft snap. He places them in the basket, handling the delicate gills with surprising tenderness for such stout fingers. As he collects the mushrooms, the earthy aroma rises around him, a mellow scent of loam and wood that mingles with the faint mineral smell of the cave. Lantern light casts long shadows behind Grimmel as he moves in this patient task. In the silence, he continues humming the same dwarf lullaby he'd murmured in his vault, a habit when he is content and at ease. The low notes of his tune mix with the gentle drip of the cavern, creating a lullaby of the mountain itself. Perhaps an hour passes in this unhurried foraging and wandering. Time seems to slow in the subterranean twilight. There is no rush, no pressing matter, only the next simple task and the solid reassurance of stone underfoot. With the basket now half filled with mushrooms, Grimmel decides that's enough for today's needs. There will be plenty for a stew or pie to share at supper. He stands up straight, stretching his back. Even dwarves, stocky as they are, feel the slight ache of bending after a while. He lets out a satisfied acker as he finishes the stretch, a sound that in the quiet cavern seems almost loud but quickly dissipates. Before departing, Grimmel takes one last look around the grotto. In the glow of his lantern, the scene is serene, the placid pool reflecting the shimmer of mineral veins above, the neat cluster of logs now missing a few mushrooms, the stalagmites rising from the ground like the pillars of a pair. Natural cathedral. He feels a swell of gratitude for this mountain and its steady bounty ore and gems, water and food, history and shelter. It is a gratitude the dwarves rarely voice aloud, but it lives in their heartbeats and their craftsmanship. On the far side of the cavern stands a weathered stone statue tucked into a niche. It's easy to miss in the darkness, but Grimmel knows it well. The statue depicts a dwarf from ancient legend, a guardian spirit of the mountain. The figure is depicted with a kind but stern face, holding a lantern in one hand and a pickaxe in the other. Though its features have softened with age, the statue emanates a watchful presence. Grimmel steps over to it and bows his head respectfully. He places a hand on the statue's foot, which is at his chest level, and whispers a few words in the old tongue. A brief thanks to the guardian for keeping their halls safe and their labours fruitful. This simple ritual, performed by generations of his kin, gives him comfort. It feels as though the mountain itself hears and acknowledges the thanks. At length, Grimmel retrieves his lantern and heads back toward the tunnel by which he entered. He leaves the cavern, walking once more through the narrow passage that winds upward. Now his basket of mushrooms swings gently in one hand, and the lantern in the other, lighting the way back. Each step feels unhurried. The day has been kind to him, so far productive yet calm, filled with good food, good work, and quiet moments of reflection. Soon the signs of inhabited space begin to reappear. The floor grows more even underfoot, and the faint marks of recent boot prints become visible in the lantern light. The gentle draught carries the distant aroma of cooking from the kitchens the supper preparations must have begun. Grimmel realizes, with mild surprise, that afternoon has drifted toward evening while he roamed. A contented tiredness settles in his bones, a pleasant fatigue from a day well spent. With the mushrooms in hand and peace in his heart, the dwarf makes his way back towards the heart of the stronghold. The prospect of a hearty dinner and a mug of ale, enjoyed in the company of his fellow dwarves, sounds very inviting now. The quiet of the deep tunnels will soon give way to the warm light and soft chatter of the gathering hall, and Grimmel is ready for it. His lantern light merges with the glow of distant torches as he leaves the deep quiet behind, carrying the calm of that hidden grotto within him for the evening to come. Chapter 6. Evening Feast and Song. By the time Grimmel emerges from the depths of the tunnels and returns to the main halls, evening has settled over the stronghold. The corridors are aglow with torchlight and the pleasant bustle of dwarves ending their workday. He can hear the distant sounds of clattering pots and cheerful voices flowing from the great hall ahead. The smell of savory food, roasted meats, root vegetables, and rich mushroom stew wafts through the passages, making his mouth water. With eager steps, Grimmel heads to join his kin for the evening feast. The great hall is now filled with a warm, golden light. The large fireplace is ablaze, and additional torches in wall sconces cast lively flickers across the stone pillars. The long tables that were sparsely occupied at breakfast are now lined with dwarves of all ages, miners fresh from the tunnels, blacksmiths with the soot washed from their hands, crafts dwarves, guards, and family members alike. An atmosphere of contentment pervades the hall. Conversations are gentle and happy, deep chuckles here, soft laughter there, and the clink of mugs toasting the day's accomplishments. Grimmel finds his place at a table near the hearth, where a few familiar faces scoot aside to make room. They welcome him with nods and pats on the back as he settles onto the bench. Directly across sits Ordwin, the white-bearded elder from the morning, who now cradles a lute in his lap, idly plucking a quiet melody while waiting for supper to be fully served. To Bremel's left is a younger dwarf, Marla, who works in the mushroom farms, her cheeks rosy from the heat of the kitchens where she's been helping cook. She notices the basket of mooncap mushrooms in Grimmel's hand and beams. "Ah, I see you've brought us some treats from the deep caves," she says in a lilting tone. Grimmel sets the basket on the table for the kitchen attendants to collect. "Aye," he replies, a note of pride creeping into his gravelly voice. "Found a fine batch. Figured they'd make a good stew for tonight." "You figured right." Marla grins, gesturing toward a huge cauldron being carried out from the kitchen by two sturdy dwarves. The fragrant steam rising from it tells Grimmel his mushrooms have already found their way into the evening's main dish. "Smells delicious," he admits, inhaling deeply. His stomach, empty from the afternoon's wanderings, growls quietly in agreement, drawing a chuckle from Ordwin across the table. Plates and bowls are soon filled as the cooks ladle out generous servings of the stew. It's a thick concoction brimming with chunks of tender venison, carrots, potatoes, and the soft mooncap mushrooms he gathered, all in a savoury gravy of herbs and ale. Grimmel wastes no time in tucking in. The first spoonful brings a delighted hum from him, the flavours of the earthy mushrooms and sweet carrots mingling perfectly with hints of thyme and bay. Alongside the stew, there are platters of freshly baked barley bread, crusty on the outside and fluffy within, perfect for sopping up broth. Wedges of cheese and crockery of butter sit at intervals on the table, and soon everyone is helping themselves, passing dishes around with polite murmurs of please and thank you. As they eat, a comfortable quiet falls at Grimmel's section of the table, broken only by contented sighs and the clatter of spoons and knives. The hearty meal fills the hungry dwarves with warmth and ease. Grimmel savours each bite slowly, feeling the warmth spread from his belly to his limbs. After the day's labours, nothing is more satisfying than a good meal shared in good company. Around him, others also eat heartily, their faces softening with relaxation. A few of his neighbours wipe foam from their moustaches as they sip dark ale from stone mugs. It's the picture of homely comfort beneath the mountain. Once his bowl is mostly empty, Grimmel leans back slightly, taking a long quaff of his evening ale. Unlike the mild brew of the morning, this ale is full-bodied and dark, with notes of molasses and a creamy head of foam. It leaves a pleasant bitterness on the tongue that balances the richness of the stew. Around him, others are also finishing up, some wiping their beards with kerchiefs, others already pouring second mugs of ale or mead. The hall grows a touch quieter as appetites are appeased. This is often the time when the dwarves turn to gentle entertainment stories, songs, or simply quiet reminiscing. Tonight, Ordwin across from Grimmel clears his throat and stills the soft strumming of his lute, drawing a few glances and smiles from those nearby. He begins to pluck a more deliberate tune, a slow, soothing melody that drifts through the hall like a wandering breeze. Conversations lull as dwarves perk their ears to the familiar old song. It's an ancient air, a traditional dwarven evening song passed down through generations. Grimmel closes his eyes for a moment as the music washes over him. The lute notes are rich and calming, carrying with them memories of many nights just like this. When Ordwin begins to sing, his voice is a deep baritone, weathered but steady. He sings in the dwarven tongue, but the meaning is felt rather than literally understood by those unfamiliar with the words. It is a song of home and hearth, of the safety of stone walls and the kinship of those gathered within them. The lyrics speak of the mountain's heart beating in time with the dwarf's own heart, and of golden lantern light guiding the weary back to rest. As the chorus comes, a few other voices around the hall quietly join in, including Grimmel's own, rumbling low and soft. The dwarves sway gently in time with the music, under mountain calm and deep. In halls of stone we sow and reap, hearth fire warm, our spirits old, home in caverns rich with gold. Under mountain, safe we keep, watch and ward, where dreams do creep. The simple lullaby-like chorus repeats, each time softer, like a candle flickering low. Even those who do not sing, hum along, or tap their fingers gently on the table, creating a unity of rhythm. The effect is enchantingly soothing. A few of the youngest dwarflings, bellies full and lulled by the music, nod off against their mother's arms or on their father's laps. The adults smile at this, their normally stern faces gentled in the firelight. When the song ends, it trails off into a peaceful silence, The listeners breathe a collective sigh of contentment, and a quiet murmur of appreciation passes through the hall. Ordwin chuckles and returns to nursing his ale, the lute quiet once more. Grimmel catches his eye and gives him an approving nod. "Well sung," he says simply, which in dwarvish understatement carries the weight of high praise. Ordwin inclines his head graciously. Now dessert is brought out, a treat of the simpler sort. One of the cooks proudly carries in a tray of baked apples, one for each dwarf who wants one. The fruits have been cored and stuffed with honey, cinnamon, and crushed nuts, then roasted by the fire until soft and caramelized. The sweet, spiced aroma wafts through the hall. Grimmel happily accepts a baked apple, the skin blistered and golden from the heat. Using his eating knife, he cuts into the tender flesh and savors a bite. The apple is warm and soothingly sweet, the cinnamon and honey creating a flavor that tastes like pure comfort. It's a beloved rustic dessert among mountain folk and the perfect gentle finish to the meal. As he enjoys the last of his apple, Grimmel feels a deep contentment settling over him. Around the hall, the dwarves have broken off into quiet conversations once more. Some discuss the day's work, others make light-hearted jests. A few have even started a subdued game of stones in a corner, the clack of polished rocks on the table forming a soft counterpoint to the chatter. The volume never rises too high. It seems everyone is inclined toward a peaceful evening. Finally, with the meal concluded and his hunger thoroughly satisfied, Grimmel decides it's time to retire for the night. He stands up from the table, stretching his arms and rolling his shoulders comfortably. A couple of his dinner companions bid him good night with waves or claps on the arm. Marla thanks him again for the mushrooms, and he responds with a humble grunt that barely hides his pleasure at being useful. He picks up his empty basket, now cleaned and returned to him by the kitchen staff, and nods farewell to those still lingering at the table. Grimmel makes his way out of the great hall as other dwarves also begin to drift away toward their chambers. The halls of the stronghold are calm, lit by low-burning lanterns. His footsteps echo softly as he strolls back through the familiar corridors, passing the dining hall's grand doorway and moving toward the residential wing. On the way, he passes a few fellow dwarves heading the same direction. They exchange cordial good nights in hushed voices. One dwarf yawns widely, and Grimmel finds himself suppressing a yawn of his own in sympathy. The satisfying meal and the warmth of the hall have made him pleasantly drowsy. As he climbs a short flight of steps, he notices out of habit that all is well. The gates are shut for the night, the storerooms secured, and a pair of sentries stand on duty in the central atrium, though they too lean against their spears in a relaxed posture, nodding greeting as he passes. There is no sense of alarm or worry in the air, only the thick, comfortable quiet of a community at rest. Soon, Grimmel arrives at the familiar oak door of his own chamber. He traces a carved pattern on the door, a smith's hammer, and a mountain symbols of his identity proudly displayed. The dwarf gives a final content huff and pushes open the door, ready to conclude this peaceful day and slip into the embrace of a well-earned night's sleep. Chapter 7: Nightfall and Deep Slumber. Grimmel closes the door of his chamber behind him, shutting out the last murmurs of the hall. Inside, his bedroom is just as he left it this morning, quiet and welcoming in its simplicity. The hearth has only faint embers now, so he adds a small log and stirs them gently until a soft flame comes alive, casting a dim orange glow. The room warms again to a cozy temperature, chasing away the slight chill of the stone. With a content sigh, the dwarf begins his nightly routine. He sets his empty mushroom basket aside and removes his fur-lined vest, hanging it on a stout peg jutting from the wall. He takes off his heavy boots, one by one, placing them neatly by the door. Relief spreads through his feet. At being free of them, he wiggles his toes appreciatively in his thick woolen socks. Next, he unbuckles his wide belt, along with the tools and pouches attached to it, and lays it on a wooden bench. Each item finds its designated place order and habit, even in winding down. Dressed now in just his tunic and trousers, Grimmel lights a small tallow candle on his bedside table, more out of ritual than necessity. The gentle candlelight joins the ember glow, painting amber highlights on the carved stone walls. He takes a moment to tidy his beard, rebraiding a few loose strands with nimble fingers. It's a soothing activity for him, one that signals the transition from the day's labours to the rest of night. He then crosses the room to a small round window set into the rock. It's more of a shuttered vent to the outside than a true window, but if one opens it, a sliver of the world beyond can be seen. Grimmel unhooks the latch and swings the shutter open. Cool night air immediately wafts in, carrying with it the faint scent of pine resin and the crisp clarity of alpine night. Grimmel breathes deeply, enjoying the contrast to the warm indoor air. The sky over the Bavarian Alps is clear and dark, scattered with countless stars. They shimmer cold and bright. Old friends watched by generations of dwarves who occasionally steal a glance at them from secret mountain windows like this. Far below in the valley, only a few tiny lights are visible, perhaps lanterns in a distant human village, twinkling like grounded stars against the darkness. The dwarf gazes for a short while, taking in the tranquil scene. The jagged silhouette of the mountain peaks stands guard under the starlight, and a thin crescent moon has risen, casting a gentle silver outline on the highest crags. The night is serene. Even the wind is quiet, with just the faintest whisper brushing the treetops down the slope. Grimmel murmurs a good night to the mountains in his native tongue, a habit from childhood Gut Nacht, Burge. He gently closes the shutter again and fastens the latch, sealing out the cold air, but keeping the vast peace of the starry sky in his heart. He makes one last round of his room. From a wooden hook he lifts a small amulet and slips it around his neck, a simple stone carved with his family rune. He likes to wear it when sleeping, a comfort object, reminding him of his lineage and the protection of his ancestors. He ensures the door is securely closed and slides a little iron bolt across it. The bolt makes a soft click, a final note of security. Grimmel then returns to his bed. The sturdy frame barely creaks as he sits on its edge. He pulls off his socks, giving his feet a final rub. Then he swings his legs up and eases himself under the heavy bearskin furs. The bed welcomes him with the promise of rest. The linens have been warmed by the hearth's glow and feel pleasant against his tired limbs. Lying on his back for a moment, Grimmel allows himself to fully sink into the mattress, a firm straw-stuffed cushion topped with soft wool that cradles his weight just right. He blows out the little bedside candle, plunging the chamber into gentle darkness. Only the faint glow from the hearth remains, a dim flicker that dances on the ceiling in a soothing, irregular pattern. Shadows sway like friendly giants across the carved figures on the walls. In the quiet, Grimmel can hear the slow, distant pulse of the mountain, a deep silence broken only by the far-off drip of water in the tunnels and the low hum of the night breeze resonating through the stone. These sounds are as good as a lullaby to him, nature's own bedtime song for the dwarf who knows and loves them. Curled under his thick blankets, Grimmel lets his thoughts drift. He reflects on the day with quiet satisfaction. The solid work at the forge, the gleam of the newly forged pickaxe, the comforting weight of gold and gems in his hands, the peaceful walk through the grotto, the laughter and song shared during the evening feast. There was no grand adventure or great battle, nothing the bards would sing about in the halls of kings, and that is precisely what he treasures about it. It was an ordinary day under the mountain, full of simple joys and honest labour, the kind of day that makes up a rich life when strung together one by one. As drowsiness gradually claims him, Grimmel's breathing deepens and slows. He turns onto his side, nestling into a particularly soft part of the pillow. One work-hardened hand instinctively clutches the edge of the fur blanket close to his chin. In the dim hearthglow, his face looks peaceful, the usual stern lines smoothed out in repose. His eyes grow heavy, lids fluttering shut even as he remembers the tender melody of the song from dinner. In his mind, he hums the refrain once more, barely audible a final comfort as he drifts away. Under mountain, safe we keep the words trail off into a mumble as sleep finally takes hold. The dwarf's thoughts melt into the formless, pleasant darkness of slumber. Perhaps he will dream of the clinking of gold coins, or the gentle ring of hammers, familiar comforts echoing in the distance of his dreaming mind. Or maybe there will simply be the quiet void of deep, restful sleep, as solid and enduring as the mountain around him. All around, the stronghold is settling for the night. Halls that were lively with feasting and song grow hushed. One by one, lanterns are dimmed and doors close. A sense of absolute safety pervades these chambers under the earth-thick walls, and ancient magic protecting those inside. In Grimmel's chamber, the fire in the hearth reduces to a faint glow like the last wink of dusk. The dwarf sleeps on, cosy and untroubled, his gentle snores as soft as a cat's purr. Outside, the Bavarian Mountains stand silent under the moon. Stars wheel slowly overhead, keeping their eternal watch. The world above and the world below are at peace. And in the deep heart of the mountain, Grimmel the dwarf slumbers soundly, surrounded by the warmth of his bed, the security of stone, and the quiet pride of a day well lived. As the night deepens, all is still and well in the dwarven stronghold, a haven of rest carved in the living rock, where one gruff, greedy, good-hearted dwarf dreams sweetly until the dawn comes again.